Welcome to the Not Old Better Show, the show covering all things health, wellness, culture, and more. The show for all of us who aren't old, we're better. Each week, we'll interview superstars, experts, and ordinary people doing extraordinary things, all related to this wonderful experience of getting better, not older. Now, here's your host, the award-winning Paul Vogelsang.
If you're a gardener, like we are here, and even if you're not, I want to welcome you to an absolutely captivating episode of the Not Old Better Show Smithsonian Associates interview series, where we always explore the intriguing world around us, particularly the world of honeybees. With our distinguished guest today, Smithsonian Associate Dr. Thomas D. Seeley. Dr. Thomas Seeley is a renowned expert in honeybee behavior. He's authored the groundbreaking book available everywhere titled Piping Hot Bees and Boisterous Buzz Runners, 20 Mysteries of Honeybees Solved. You got to check out this book, especially the reference to the word piping. You'll love this. But Smithsonian Associate Dr. Thomas Seeley will be appearing at Smithsonian Associates coming up, so please check out our website and show notes today for more information. But we have Dr. Seeley today, and we will delve into Dr. Seeley's pioneering research, which he'll share during his upcoming Smithsonian Associates presentation, and then briefly whet our appetites with all of that research today. The title of his presentation at Smithsonian Associates is Abuzz About Bees. He's going to help us unlock the secrets behind the communicative movements of honeybees and reveal how worker bees meticulously select a home site for their colony. This is fascinating. Honeybees play an indispensable role in maintaining biodiversity and ensuring our survival, yet many of their behaviors have remained mysteries until now. Smithsonian Associate Dr. Thomas Seeley's insights into how bees choose their nests, communicate vital information through the iconic waggle dance, you're gonna love that, and make collective decisions are nothing short of revolutionary. Dr. Seeley's work not only enhances our understanding of these remarkable insects, but also underscores the importance of conserving them. Join us for this enlightening episode as Smithsonian Associate Dr. Thomas Seeley shares his journey of discovery, offering a glimpse into the sophisticated and intelligent world of honeybees. Whether you're a seasoned beekeeper, a gardener, or simply curious about the natural world, this conversation promises to deepen your appreciation for these fascinating creatures and the critical role they play in our ecosystem. Dr. Thomas Seeley, welcome to the program.
It's my pleasure to be here with you, Paul.
So nice to talk with you. I'm very excited to talk to you about your new book titled Piping Hot Bees and Boisterous Buzz Runners. Just wonderful. It's gotten a lot of great reviews. We'll jump into it here in just a moment and talk about it. But I thought what might be helpful for our audience is to talk about your upcoming Smithsonian Associates presentation and tell us briefly what we might look forward to seeing of you.
Well, Paul, what I decided to do is to copy the style of the book. The book is 20 short stories. I figured I might be able to tell 4 or 5 short stories in the time that I have with the Smithsonian Associates. That's my plan, is to tell some short stories. I'll be presenting the material in the same sort of style as in the book, where I'm assuming it's not a beekeeper. It's person doesn't even have to have any knowledge about the biology of honeybees.
And the book, we can talk about this idea of the stories. It struck me as though it's a little bit of a memoir.
It is very much a memoir. For example, there are 20 chapters and they're organized in chronological order. The first one starts with my first investigation, and the last chapter deals with one of my later investigations. It's not comprehensive by any means, but it certainly is organized chronologically.
Well, it's fascinating. And I think your life is one that's also fascinating. I know our audience is just going to be thrilled with this presentation. So many of us are gardeners, and I think we're excited to know more about bees. What was it that attracted you to these wonderful creatures?
Wow. That's a deep question, and I don't know as I fully understand their appeal to me. But I think it's a combination of a few things, several things. One is it's a look into a world where everybody gets along. They're all cooperating. It's all for the good of the colony. Also, we're looking at the behavior of insects where the behavior is extremely complicated. These are probably the most intelligent and socially complex insects that there are. probably maybe even of all species other than human beings. So I think it is that element of the complexity of the society and the complexity of the behavior of the individuals within the society that is the long-standing appeal to me that underlies the detective work that I've done, trying to solve mysteries about all these complicated things that they do.
Was there one particular moment, or maybe several, that you can recall that really drew you into this fascinating behavior of theirs?
Yes. It was my first interaction with honeybees, really. It was when a swarm of bees, and a swarm is a queen along with about 15,000 worker bees. Just by chance, I watched a swarm move into a hollow tree along the road near where I was growing up when I was not even 10 years old. I saw those bees go in. I saw them organize their entry, this vast cloud of bees, into that tree cavity. And then, of course, I had a chance to go back and watch them. And because everything was out of sight except for their comings and goings and some guard bee behavior at the nest entrance, it was like a huge mystery to me. What's going on inside there? Have they got combs in there? Those sorts of things. So yes, I could see there was a lot going on, but I didn't know what they were doing.
You've written another great book that I found in my research of you called Honeybee Democracy. And you talk about the decision-making ability of bees. Could you tell us a little bit about how bees make decisions and how they kind of communicate that so that they can build some esprit de corps and build the hive and prosper?
Yeah, the phenomenon you mentioned, the decision-making really is performed by the worker bees when they need to choose a new home. That is probably the most sophisticated form of collective decision-making they do. And it's one in which a swarm of bees, first of all, is a group of about 15,000 bees. 3% function as nest site scouts. All the rest of the bees just hang out in a cluster with the queen protected in the center of the cluster. It looks like a beard. Those 500 or so nest site scouts go out, search for potential home sites, and then they run in competition among themselves. It's a friendly competition to identify which of the dozen or so home sites that have been found is really the best one. Individuals come back and they report. And when they report on a potential home site, they adjust the strength of their reporting according to the goodness of the site that they find. So if they find a very good site, they'll do a dance that might last for several minutes. If it's a mediocre site, maybe a minute. If it's a poor site, just for maybe a fraction of a minute. And the dances that last longer get the most attention. Things build up fastest, and the popularity builds up most rapidly at the best site. And they have a rule that once a site accumulates a few hundred bees at it, then that tells them that this site has won in the competition. And then those bees, they have signals they make. The bees from the winning site go back, tell everybody else that the decision has been completed. We've identified the best site available. And then they go to the next step of implementing their decision. It is something that I was first examined a little bit in Germany by a German scientist in the 1950s. And when I read about his work, I was fascinated. And I came on the scene when we have the technology of video recording and so forth, and slow motion playback, and ability to label every individual bee in a swarm of thousands of bees. So I was able to really go deeply into that process.
I want to ask you about the best site. What are the characteristics of a bee's selection? What gets the most enthusiastic responses from bees? We all hear about location, location, location. What does it for the bees?
Yeah, I like that expression, location, 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 because there are three things that are most important, three aspects of location. One is the size of the cavity. They have to have enough room in the tree cavity in which to build their combs and store up honey, enough honey to be able to get through winter. Honey is the colony's winter heating fuel. So they need about 10 gallons of space, or about 1.5 cubic feet, I guess it is. The other thing they need is an entrance that is small, so it's not really drafty and can be easily defended. So maybe a couple of inches square, 1 to 2 square inches of opening. And the third thing that's very important to the bees is if they can find it, if they can get that cavity that's the right size and with a small entrance, if they can have that entrance high off the ground, that is very attractive to them. And the reason for that height is about making their nest less conspicuous to bears in particular. So that's a part of the keeping the defense of the nest, or not defense, but the lack of keeping the nest hidden away.
Hi, it's Paul. Do you love entertaining, informative, eclectic, insightful programs about culture, health, science, life, and everything Smithsonian. As part of our Smithsonian Associates interview series on radio and podcast, we're introducing you to the new Smithsonian Associates streaming series. Smithsonian, a nonprofit organization, is excited to present this new aspect of their 55 years as the world's largest museum-based educational program. Join us from the comfort of your home as we periodically interview Smithsonian Associate guest speakers. Our audience here on radio and podcast can explore our website for more information, links, and details at notold-better.com. Thanks, everybody. Our guest today, of course, is Dr. Thomas Seeley, who's written the wonderful new book on bees titled Piping Hot Bees and Boisterous Buzz Runners. The book's getting great reviews. Dr. Seeley, I found that Lawrence Marshall from Natural History magazine wrote a wonderful review that I'll just read a part of it. While readers will come to share Dr. Seeley's respect for the cognitive sophistication of these tiny creatures and their complex collective behaviors, they will also come away with a deep admiration for the curious, energetic scientist who was motivated so long ago to find out how the honeybees do it. I thought that was nice because it compliments you so much for this wonderful book, and congratulations on it. It's just fantastic. I know you've written other books too, Honeybee Democracy, and we are grateful to be talking to you today about this new book. You mentioned in the bees' exuberance for a potential nest site, a dance. And in my research, I found the dance, I believe it's known as the waggle dance as form of bee communication. Can you describe a little bit about the waggle dance and, in essence, what it signifies and what it's supposed to communicate?
Yeah, the waggle dance is one of several dances honeybees have, and it's the dance they use to communicate important places, the locations of important sites. Important sites to bees are rich patches of flowers that are offering lots of pollen and nectar, or their home sites, potential home sites, tree cavities like we just talked about, or they could be water sources. And the way the waggle dance works is it's a miniaturized reenactment inside the nest of a bee's flight out to one of these sites. When they do the dance, they walk across the comb while waggling their body back and forth. And the curious and the key thing is that they're doing this dance inside their nest where it's dark. They can't see the sun. But before they came into the nest, they noted, okay, to get to that patch of flowers, I fly at this angle relative to the direction of the sun. It might be in the west, for example. And then when it gets inside the nest, it remembers that angle. Let's say its flowers are 30 degrees to the right of the direction of the sun. It then forms its waggling motion as it walks across the comb at 30 degrees to the right of straight up on the comb. So it uses up as a reference inside and the sun's direction as the direction reference outside the nest. And then the other thing it does is it adjusts the duration of what's called the waggle run in each circuit of the dance in accordance with the distance to the target that she's advertising. She can fly out 1 mile, 2 miles, 3 miles, and accordingly she adjusts the duration of what we call the waggle run phase of the dance to be 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds or so. I like to think of the waggle dance as a miniaturized reenactment of a bee's flight out to her food source. And there's one more thing, if I can squeeze this in about this waggle dance.
Yeah.
It is that there are only 2 species on the planet that have this ability to tell another individual abstractly about the location of something. Now, there are many animals that lay trails or can lead other members of their group out to an important site, but there's only 2 species that can do it, can give directions. Those are human beings and honeybees. And so remarkably, that's something that we humans share with these little bees. It's a very sweet thing to know.
That is. That's a lovely thing to know. In addition to the waggle dance, what else did you learn that surprised you about bee behavior? And how did you decode some of these actions so that you could make sense of it all?
Wow, what an important question there you've got, Paul. There are many behaviors that the bees have that beekeepers and bee researchers have observed for decades. But the challenge is understanding what it was that stimulated the bee to produce that. That's usually a good clue about what the purpose of it is. And let me give you an example to make this point clearly. There's a dance called the tremble dance. It's very curious behavior where a bee walks across the comb inside her nest and she trembles her body. It looks like she's suffering some neurodegenerative disease or maybe has gotten some pesticide. It looks like her body or nervous system is malfunctioning. But it turns out it's a signal. It's a very special signal they make. And it is a signal that says we need more bees to function as the nectar receivers in the nest. The bee that's done a tremble dance has come back from a dynamite food source, a superb source of nectar. She gets back to the nest, and then she has trouble finding somebody who will unload her nectar, will receive her nectar and store it in the combs. So she does this tremble dance, and that activates more of the middle-aged bees, it turns out, to function as nectar receivers. And so it's part of a control system that they have in the nest. I like to say that when I go to still go to my local grocery store where they have checkout lines.
Yes,
sometimes the line is long. And I wish I could do a tremble dance when the lines are long to tell the manager, you gotta open up more checkout lines here.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, maybe inject some bees into the checkout line, and we'll see how everybody moves aside very quickly. The piping hot reference is also something interesting that they do. What is the piping, in particular piping? What does that refer to?
The piping signal is a signal, and it sounds like this. It's a signal made by bees to tell other bees to warm up and get ready to fly away. And it occurs primarily in the context of when a colony is about to cast a swarm, and that is to say, have the mother queen leave with about 2/3 of the worker bee. Bees that know that it's time for the swarm to emerge, the weather is good and so forth, they run through the nest and they pipe other bees. It involves one bee, the piper grabbing another bee, pressing her thorax against the other bee's body, and making that sound with her using her wing muscles or flight muscles. It says, warm up your flight muscles, get ready to go. But it sounds like a little bees piping away. That's why we call it the piping signal.
That's wonderful.
It's a signal that beekeepers had heard for many, many years, and that includes myself. So it was a real special treat to finally understand what that was, to understand the context in which it's produced and what its effects are.
Where I live, here in Fairfax County in Northern Virginia, there is actually a property tax reduction that corresponds with winning a lottery to allow homeowners to keep bees on our property. And my wife and I enter the lottery every single year. We've done so for probably 20 years. We never have won. Are we at a point where we need to protect the honeybees? We hear that an awful lot. Is that really where things are? Do we need to make sure and promote the protection of these wonderful creatures, or are they doing just fine?
It's kind of a mixed story there, Paul. Not a simple answer. We could do more to help the bees by using fewer pesticides on gardens and things like that. Those are poisons to insects. But in general, I would say probably not. We know from about half the colonies that are in North America are living in the wild, all on their own, and they're away from agriculture and sources of damage and things like that. The other 50% of the colonies are living under beekeepers' supervision. And ironically, it's the colonies living in the wild that are doing better than the colonies that are managed. And you might think, why is that? There's a couple of reasons. One is, when colonies are managed by beekeepers, they're often put in difficult living situations. They can be crowded in apiaries. They can be loaded on trucks to be trucked from the East Coast to the West Coast and back. And there they're prone to overheating. By living close together, disease can spread. So under management, beekeepers estimate that they might only have about 20% of their colonies live from one spring to the next. So that's a tough life for colonies. In the wild, it's a cleaner environment. They're not crowded up together. They're not spreading disease. So I'm very optimistic that we will always have the wild bees, and they will be with us. They got introduced in the 1600s, I think it was, and they've been having a good time in North America ever since.
Well, Dr. Thomas Seeley, author of the wonderful new book, Piping Hot Bees and Boisterous Buzzrunners, 20 Mysteries of Honeybee Behaviors Solved. We'll look forward to your upcoming Smithsonian Associates presentation where we can learn about the 20 mysteries and much, much more, Dr. Seeley. But thanks so much for being generous with your time and for this wonderful book. Again, congratulations on this work. As you do more work on this subject, I'll just say selfishly, please come back. We'd love to know more. I know our audience is going to be very interested in this subject. My best to you, and we will see you at Smithsonian Associates coming up.
Thank you very much, Paul, to you and the Smithsonian Associates for inviting me to present and share some of the things that I've discovered about the bees.
Thank you. My thanks to Smithsonian Associate Dr. Thomas Seeley, who will be appearing at Smithsonian Associates coming up. Please check out our website and our show notes today for more information. Dr. Thomas Seeley is a renowned expert in honeybee behavior. He's authored the groundbreaking book titled Piping Hot Bees and Boisterous Buzz Runners, 20 Mysteries of Honeybees Solved. You're going to just love that book. My thanks to the Smithsonian team for all they do to support the show. My thanks, as always, to executive producer Sam Henniger, who helps us with all things sound and a lot of other things too here on the show. My thanks, of course, to you, our wonderful audience here on radio and podcast. Please be well, be safe, and let's talk about better. The Not Old Better Show, Smithsonian Associates interview series on radio and podcast. Thanks, everybody. We will see you next week.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Not Old Better Show. To find out more about all of today's stories or to view our extensive back catalog of previous shows, simply visit notold-better.com. Join us again next time as we deep dive into some of the most fascinating real-life stories from across the world, all focused on this wonderful experience of getting better, not just older. Let's talk about better. The Not Old Better Show.
Hi, one final thing. Please check out our website for this episode and all episodes at notold-better.com, or subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, and be sure to check out your local radio stations to find out more about the Not Old Better Show on podcast and radio. You can find us all over social media. Our Twitter feed is Not Old Better, and we're on Instagram at Not Old Better too. The Not Old Better Show is a production of NOBS Studios. I'm Paul Vogelsang, and I hope you'll join me again next time to talk about better. The Not Old Better Show. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.